I'm Del Walters in Washington, D.C. You are watching On the Scene. President Trump continues his trip through the Middle East at this hour as he winds down that historic peace summit in Egypt with dozens of world leaders who have gathered. The president speaking a moment ago about what he called a new beginning for an entire beautiful Middle East. His words. Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull live in our D.C. newsroom now with the very latest. And Haley, what has been President Trump's message to the world leaders that did gather?
Well, Del, this has largely been a celebration for President Trump and world leaders of the breakthrough in Gaza, while at the same time looking ahead to its future. What we heard moments ago in President Trump's speech was him thanking leaders for their role, calling it a monumental moment, as those leaders also returned the praise of President Trump. President Trump declared the war over, told world leaders that they have, quote, achieved the impossible, while proclaiming peace in the Middle East after the U.S., Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey signed that peace agreement. Now, the release of hostages today marks the first phase, though Trump noted that they are continuing the work on returning the bodies of those hostages that have been killed, while the next phase turns towards the governance, security, and reconstruction of Gaza in particular. That, Trump said specifically, may be what he called the easiest, noting countries have raised their hand to financially aid the reconstruction. He went on to say this about the next steps.
We've all agreed that supporting Gaza must be done to lift up the people themselves, but we don't want to fund anything having to do with bloodshed, hatred, or terror, as has happened in the past. And for the same reason, we're also agreed that Gaza's reconstruction requires that it be demilitarized.
Now, Del, Trump, when we pressed him on Friday about whether there is consensus on the next phases of his plan, said that there is consensus, but noted some details will need to be worked out, and indicated that he might seek to hash that out while in Egypt. He did also meet with leaders while they're on the ground. Notably, Egypt also presented to President Trump the Nile of the Collar. This is Egypt's highest state honor, Del.
And Haley, what about those next phases? All experts seem to indicate this is where the hard work begins. What do we know about that?
Yeah, this is where there are a lot of questions that still remain. The next pieces focus on governance and rebuilding of Gaza. These next steps, so historically, have been issues where there have been points of difference between some nations. Now, the specific next steps officials have indicated includes U.S. Central Command standing up a joint task force with up to 200 U.S. personnel already in the region who are not to go into Gaza, but to oversee the ceasefire and help ensure there are no violations, with forces including potentially from Egypt and Qatar. It also calls for the creation of an international stabilization force to help train police and secure borders, according to the deal that President Trump first publicly presented. It also calls for governance by what it calls a technocratic Palestinian committee with oversight from a board of peace President Trump says he will chair. He has not specifically laid out who else will also be on that board. It does not allow any role for Hamas governance. It also calls for the decommissioning of Hamas's weapons, with demilitarization tied to the Israeli forces' withdrawal. That is something Hamas has not yet agreed to publicly, Del. Additionally, a Palestinian state is something Middle Eastern nations, as well as some major U.S. allies, have supported, while Israel has not. That's why it's notable that in remarks today, Egypt's President El-Sisi underscored the need for a two-state solution. The peace plan that President Trump presented does not outright guarantee that, but does nod to a potential future path for it. Trump, notably in his remarks, acknowledged the president of the Palestinian Authority, who was taking part in the summit, Del.
He did, indeed. Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull live in our D.C. newsroom. Haley, thank you very much.